Hello everyone, and welcome to DM Tools with MaxMcCool. On today's episode of Monsters Manifested, we'll be covering the Azer. So, without further ado, let's jump right into it. The Azer covers page 22 of the Monster Manual, and its lore goes as follows. Natives of the elemental plane of fire, Azers are master crafters, expert miners, and sworn foes of the Efreet. In appearance and manner, an Azer resembles a male dwarf, but this is a facade. Beneath its metallic-looking skin, an Azer is a being of fire, which outwardly manifests in its fiery hair and beard. Pretty cool. They definitely look like a more infernal dwarf, I suppose you could say. Made, not born. Azers don't reproduce. They are each crafted from bronze by another Azer and imbued with a portion of the crafter's inner flame. Each Azer is sculpted with unique features. This crafting process limits the growth of the Azer population and is the primary reason that these creatures remain rare. Okay, that begs the question then, who made the first Azer then? That's already given me some ideas here. Okay, moving on. Volcanic dwellers. Azers dwell in a kingdom on the border between the elemental plane of earth and the elemental plane of fire. A range of mountains and volcanoes whose spires rise as a series of fortresses. Beneath mountain peaks, under volcanic calderas, and amid rivers of magma, Azers extract gleaming metals and glittering gems from the earth. Squads of Azer patrol pass... Beneath mountain peaks, under volcanic calderas, and amid rivers of magma, Azers extract gleaming metals and glittering gems from the earth. Squads of Azer patrol the passes and tunnels of their realm, fending off the salamander raiders whose Efreet master's order strikes against the Azer kingdom. So that's, again, already given me some ideas. We can use the elemental plane of earth and fire with an adventure in this, especially since they have a kingdom that borders it. Could lead to some interesting interactions or scenarios. Let's move on. Enemies of the Efreet. Long ago, the Efreet and the Azers were allies. Azers helped create the city of Brass, forging that home of the Efreet into one of the most wondrous places in creation. When the Azers had finished their work, the Efreet betrayed them, making a failed attempt to enslave the Azers so as to protect the secrets of the city. Despite occasional raids and skirmishes, however, the two sides have so far refrained from all-out conflict. The Azers believe that only the threat of them revealing the hidden ways into the city of Brass keeps the Efreet in check. Wow. These are really, really interesting bits of information. This is some pretty cool lore. Okay, let's go on. Masters of metal and gems. Azers are masterful artisans and create beautiful works from the gems and precious metals found in their volcanic habitat. They rate the value of such treasures above all other things, sometimes dispatching parties across the plains to seek out rare metals and gemstones. When Azers are called by magic to the material plane, it is typically to help forge an elaborate magic item or work of art, for it is said that their skill in such craft knows no equal. Alright, so they can be pulled into different planes of existence. That's pretty interesting. We can definitely use that. Have an Azer summoned up to assist in the creation of something. And finally, living fire. An Azer doesn't require food, drink, or sleep. So, all in all, the Azer seems to be a pretty cool creature, actually. Just with the lore that I've read so far, I've already got a couple of different ideas in terms of how we could implement an Azer or an encounter involving the Azer. But let's move on to the stat block. An Azer is a medium elemental with an alignment of lawful neutral. It has an armor class of 17, which is natural armor and a shield. Its hit points are an average of 39 or 6d8 plus 12, and it has a movement speed of 30 feet. The Azer has a strength of 17, dexterity of 12, constitution of 15, an intelligence of 12, a wisdom of 13, and a charisma of 10. Its saving throws include only constitution with a +4 bonus. It has damage immunities to fire and poison, condition immunities to being poisoned, has a passive perception of 11, can speak the language of Ignan, and is a challenge rating of 2. Onto the abilities. Heated Body. A creature that touches the Azer or hits it with a melee attack while within 5 feet of it takes an average of 5 or 1d10 fire damage. Heated Weapons. When the Azer hits with a metal melee weapon, it deals an extra average of 3 or 1d6 fire damage, which is included in the attack. Illumination. The Azer sheds bright light in a 10-foot radius and dim light for an additional 10 feet. Onto the actions. Warhammer is a melee weapon attack with a +5 to hit, a reach of 5 feet, on one target. On a hit, it does an average of 7 or 1d8 plus 3 bludgeoning damage, or an average of 8 or 1d10 plus 3 bludgeoning damage if used with two hands to make a melee attack, plus an average of 3 or 1d6 fire damage. Oh, this seems to be the first page that has a quote provided by a character in the world. Give me 100 Azer slaves, and I can forge an empire that would make the gods tremble. Araxis al-Sakar, Efridi Pasha. Interesting. All right, and that's all we've got for the Azer. So let's see what we can do in terms of creating some scenarios that involve them. Well, I mean, already they're pretty interesting in just the way that they've been established in the universe, I guess you could say. They're residents of the elemental plane of fire. They have a nemesis in the Efreet. They dwell in a kingdom between the plane of earth and the plane of fire. So there's a lot of ways you can go about this. Immediately, the first thing that comes to mind is the little passage there that states that Azers can be summoned up to different planes in order to assist in the forging of certain items or the crafting of weapons and armor or of the mining of rare metals and gemstones. So that's a great place to start. So I already see a pretty awesome adventure kind of building itself up here for us involving the Azer. And I'll just get right into it for you guys. So I see this as a continuation of an adventure, or maybe not a continuation of an adventure. I see this as another adventure that can play off of the end of a previous adventure. So for example, let's say the players have made their way through a dungeon at the request of someone, be it a merchant or a lord or, some form of individual. Perhaps it's a mage or a sorcerer, and whatever their intentions are for the players to go through the dungeon and acquire whatever item it is that they're trying to acquire for them can be left open and can be woven together to match up with whatever it is you're trying to achieve. But the purpose for the quest giver requesting the party to acquire this item is because it's a very special item. You can kind of leave breadcrumbs for the players and say, oh, this item, you'll easily be able to distinguish it from anything else that might be in this treasure hoard, stuff like that, and just bring it back to me. I need it for an experiment or research or some form of thing like that. So the players go and they make their way through the dungeon of the previous adventure, and they find this amazing, elegant, wondrously designed item. And they pick it up and they make their way back and return it. Now, this is where the interesting stuff comes in. You can kind of divulge a little bit of lore once the players get back, right? So the players return to the quest giver with the item and provide them with the spoils, as it were. And in this case, you can either feed them the information by having the quest giver explain to them why they wanted the item, and then pepper in who created the item, why it's so unique or elegant or extravagant in comparison to the mundane arms and armor and what have you that are typical of their realm. Now, if the players are particularly curious players, they might do that for you and you might not have to feed it to them, right? They might just ask, like, why is this helmet so unique? Why does it look so different? Why is it so special? And in this instance, you could create something where the quest giver, let's use a merchant or a smith of some sort. Let's use a blacksmith because it's pretty straightforward here what I'll be getting at. You could also use a sorcerer or a mage or something like that who wants the item because it has an enchantment on it or something to that nature, which is certainly doable. But if your players are prone to taking and equipping magic items as soon as they acquire them, chances are they'll be less than willing, I'll say, to return the item to the quest giver. Either way, so the players make their way back to the quest giver, they deliver the object, the quest giver explains to them that this item was crafted and forged by a type of being known as an Azer that are essentially the craftspeople of the elemental plane of fire. They've created legendary items, they've created magnificent structures, they've developed some strange ability to, or capability to, extract rare metals and gems from the earth and work it and bend it and shape it into these magnificent things. You could even throw in that they had a hand in creating, or were mostly responsible for creating, the legendary city of brass that resides in the elemental plane of fire. Now, what is the quest giver's intention? In this, you can go two ways, I think. And both ways, I think, could be pretty cool, depending on what you want to do with the adventure and with your party, right? So you could have the blacksmith basically say, what I want to do is I want to use this item to figure out how I can summon an Azer from their plane to assist me and teach me how to create and build these items, or items of this caliber. And the players can assist there. You can actually spread that out even into smaller quests, like side quests and stuff, as it were, because an Azer is neutral, so you would need a reason to incentivize them to make it benefit them. They're not like genies. They don't just get summoned and grant wishes, right? So you would need some form of incentive, or the smith would, right? They could just leave that to the smith. Also, Azers speak Ignan, so you would need someone who could speak that language. If you have a player that speaks that already, then super convenient. Or if you have a magic user that has comprehend languages, they could then do that as well and translate and stuff. Either way, the quest giver, this craftsperson, the blacksmith that I'm using, wants to summon an Azer. Now, this is where things can split, they can diverge. Either you can have the Azer be summoned, and the Azer effectively tells the players, if you want me to teach you how to craft these things, I require specific metals or gemstones or tools or something like that. Maybe there's a specific type of smithing hammer that an Azer has to use. And when the Azer got summoned to the material plane, they didn't have their tool belt with them, you know what I mean? So you have to venture out and find one. And actually, a very interesting way of bringing this about is you could then create an instance where the players have to go and find the materials on the material plane in order to enable the Azer to teach the blacksmith how to forge an Azer's smithing hammer or something like that. That could be a neat little kind of investigative side quest or adventure right there in and of itself. However, the more involved, I'll say, or the more Azer-centric adventure I see happening is the smith manages to find some strange scroll or some sort of spell, some summoning spell that is intended to summon an Azer to assist you with crafting whatever it is. The players bring the item to the smith unravels the scroll, they want an audience to see what happens, or witnesses, and the smith reads out the scroll. However, perhaps this was a lie, or it was reversed, and it was not actually a summoning scroll that would summon an Azer, but after reading the scroll, what has happened is the blacksmith has actually teleported or plane shifted the players into the elemental plane of fire. And now the players are essentially in an entirely different plane of existence, which would be good for changing things up if that's what you wanted to do in the way of moving out of the mundane material plane into the plane of fire. You could have them land in the city of brass, and then they have to figure out what they're doing there. But I think probably a best course of action would be to have the players find themselves in this strange bordering area that, as it states in the lore, between the plane of earth and the plane of fire, which is mountainous with volcanoes, and there's like a lot of crazy spires that kind of jut out from the earth, like a series of fortresses and stuff like that. And as they get there, they find that they're amongst, perhaps it's an Azer mining company, or a group of Azers that are there kind of extracting metals and stuff like that. And what ends up happening is the Azer might be able to, they're not outwardly evil, nor are they chaotic, so it's not as though they might immediately perceive them as a threat, but they are neutral. They have a sworn enemy in the Efrit, and they don't speak, presumably, the same language as your players. So that right there could lead to some interesting things. Maybe combat is just the initial jump because all of a sudden the players have just appeared in this mine shaft or on these mountaintops, and an Azer has spotted them and doesn't know who they are. They're strange people in a strange land, and that could lead to some conflict there. Perhaps you could even do something to the effect of the smith that has the scroll, who has requested the item from the players, reads the scroll and teleports them there to this bordering area between the elemental plane of earth and fire with a mission. Perhaps it's not accidental. Perhaps they use the item that the players have acquired from the previous quest as a conduit in order to send the players to the correct location. And what the smith wants or requests is that they collect an Azer's blacksmithing hammer. And that right there provides you with a change of scenery, a mission with an end goal, and something that's sort of out of the norm, right? It's not just kick down the door, kill the thing, collect the gold. Now there's an item of significance. And then once the players are there, that could lead to another expanse of adventures, because now that the players are there between the elemental plane of earth and fire, they're kind of stuck. They have to figure out, which way do we go? Do we go to the plane of fire? Do we go through the plane of earth? And how do we get back home? You see, so now it opens up a lot of potential for different possible adventures that the players can go through. And you could have the players go through the mine shaft and maybe collect some ore for themselves, maybe collect some ore for the smith or the quest giver of some form. I mean, if this is very rare ore and gemstones and stuff like that, perhaps there's a metal or a type of mineral that's very prone or is very accepting of enchantments or of a certain form of working, metal working or gem cutting, which could lead to a pretty great outcome, especially if the players manage to successfully bring the stuff back to the smith or the enchanter or the wizard or what have you, because then they potentially have an individual who can provide them with handcrafted magic weapons or enchanted weapons and armor and stuff of that nature, which is a great way to provide your players with a space where they can go back to constantly, and it gives them that bit of familiarity. It also is a great way of kind of doling out magic items to your players, whenever they would like it to be done. And it instantiates a sense of, hey, we can always get a magic item from this person. However, we'll have to wait for them to enchant it or to craft it or anything of that nature. So it kind of continuously gives them a goal and a drive to move forward, right? As they continue adventuring, they may find more things that they want enchanted or more minerals or metals or ores or what have you that they could then bring back. It gives them an ally in a world full of enemies, which is nice to have, Another way you can go with this is you could have them appear and have them amongst this large group of Azer or Azers. I believe its plural is probably just Azer. You have them appear and find themselves amongst this large group of Azer, oddly large. It's just mass numbers and they're all just mining and working through stuff. Out of curiosity, presumably they would wonder, why are they mining all of this stuff? What's going on here? Well, perhaps the Azer are mining more than normal because they're planning an attack on the Efreet in the city of Brass. Perhaps they've gotten word of an Efreet attack that's going to be hitting them soon, maybe within the end of the month or within a few weeks or what have you. And what ends up occurring is the players now find themselves kind of in the middle of this impromptu battle and they can choose what side to fight for. Maybe there's an incentive there. Maybe the players can request from the Azer, hey, if we help you guys out, if we help you stop the Efreet attack, what can you give to us? Can you give us one of your smithing hammers? Can you forge us something? Can you create for us an item that is superior to its typical mundane variety? So it's pretty interesting in that way. I mean, you could also have the Azer in the middle of that instance, in the middle of that impromptu battle, and the players suddenly appear. Perhaps the Azer think that it's some form of incursion, These strange beings are just suddenly appear right where we're mining our resources in order to have a fighting chance, and they might immediately go on the offensive. So the Azer are really cool because there's a lot to them here that you can use and implement in terms of adventures, and then in terms of opening up adventures, right, for them. Perhaps the Azer, they're wonderful craftspeople. Obviously, they make exquisite things. Maybe they can create, or they've already created in one of their kingdoms, a portal or a teleportation stone or like a plane shifting stone. Perhaps the players have to help the Azer with this battle with the Efreet, and in return, the Azer will send them home. You could go into even further different things, like existential things of like, well, if the Azer are always crafted and they're always created by another Azer, then who is the first Azer and who created the first Azer? How did that happen, right? And that could lead through a nice lengthy sequence of campaigns or of adventures within your campaign, right? It could be like a chapter or a nice chunk of your campaign is just that kind of question, right? Perhaps the Efreet have the first Azer, they call him the first craftsman or something like that. and that Azer is trapped in the city of Brass underneath in some dungeon or some kind of, stasis tube of sorts, if you would, magical, of course, and they have to break them out. And perhaps the first Azer is the one with the information that they need to send them back to their plane. So there's a lot of ways you could build this out and kind of construct interesting scenarios and thresholds and encounters and kind of open up your campaign a little bit for your players. And it gives them, what I like to call it is, it gives them perceived choice, right? You give them a bunch of options and they have the freedom to choose within those options. And it allows them to feel as though they are making decisions for themselves and they are in fact telling a part of the story, which they are, of course. But it's a little different than a sandbox, because in a sandbox, the players just say what they want to do and where they go, and things happen wherever they are. With this, it's kind of that fine line. It's a wire between a railroad and a sandbox, because you give them a large number of options, or not large necessarily, but you give them a number of options. And then within those options, they can go anywhere they want. And it involves a little bit more prep, but I feel personally that that kind of design for a campaign is a lot better. It's a lot more beneficial, in my opinion, to both you and the players, because it allows you to generate ideas for multiple adventures within a certain section or chapter of your campaign, which you'll have set up already. And it allows the players to choose what they want to do based on where they are and what's happening. So it works out, right? They could choose to fight the Azer and just take things by force, which could lead to something else. They could choose to help the Azer and free the first Azer that's trapped in the city of Brass. That could lead to a more beneficial thing. And you then have an informed idea of what happens there if they ever return, or if there's ever an instance where they come back, or if ever there's something you want to do there in that environment again later on down the line. So I think that the Azer make for a pretty good means, actually, of opening up a campaign for your players and for yourself. If it may feel overwhelming, I know that it absolutely can, but you'll find, I'm sure, that with more options and more freedom given to your players in that way, you have more options and have more freedom with how you wish to proceed with your campaign. But anyway, that's all I've got for you guys this week. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Monsters Manifested, where we covered the Azer. Next week's episode, we'll be covering, the Banshee. Very interesting. Going from elemental plane of fire and metallic dwarf constructs almost to ghosts and ghouls. Very cool. But I'll save that for next time, and I'll see you all on the next one. Have a good day, everyone.